Welcome to week 2 of our brand new series where we recap the NFL results from this week's matchup. If you like this type of content, like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out, and I appreciate all the support as we are trying to get to 1,000 subscribers. So without further ado, let's get straight into this one. Let's get it. We open up with the Thursday night football matchup between the Buffalo Bills and the Miami Dolphins. This game will be headlined with Tua Tagovailoa's concussion late in the fourth quarter. We hope he gets better as soon as possible and hope he makes the right decision for himself, whether it's to medically retire or maybe even a scenario where the only way back onto the field is with a guardian cap. But I really truly hope he gets better as soon as possible. The Buffalo Bills defeated the Miami Dolphins 31-10. Tua Tagovailoa went 17 for 25 for 145 yards, 1 touchdown, and 3 interceptions. He was backed up by Skylar Thompson, who had 8 completions out of 14 attempts, with 0 touchdowns and 0 interceptions. Devin Achane had 22 carries for 96 yards on the day, and Josh Allen for the Buffalo Bills went 13 for 19 with 139 yards and a touchdown. James Cook had 11 carries for 78 yards and 2 touchdowns. In the first quarter, Buffalo and Miami tied, with Buffalo scoring the first points of the game. However, at the start of the second quarter, the Buffalo Bills started to pull away, taking a 24-10 lead over Miami heading into halftime, in which the Miami Dolphins didn't score a single point at the second half, and the Buffalo Bills kept increasing their lead till they won with the final score 31-10. Here is the next matchup of the week early Sunday morning between the Los Angeles Chargers and the Carolina Panthers, in which the Chargers defeated the Panthers 26-3. Justin Herbert went 14 for 20 for 130 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 1 interception. Bryce Young went 18 for 26 for 84 yards and 1 interception. And this result for Bryce Young ended up with him being benched next week for week 3, as Andy Dalton will get the nod to start. Justin Herbert also got hurt in this game, in which his condition for week 3 is still up in the air against the Steelers. For the Chargers, J.K. Dobbins had 17 carries for 131 yards and a touchdown. He continued off his week 1 performance to get over 130 yards for both games. Quentin Johnston had 51 yards with 2 touchdowns on the day. The Chargers scored the first points of the game and increased their lead to 13 in the second quarter and increased it to 20 as both teams headed into halftime. They had a 20-0 lead and therefore led the entire way. Carolina, on their first drive of the second half, scored a field goal, and that was the final points of the game for the Panthers, and the Chargers took control and won this game pretty handedly. Heading into week 3, the Chargers are 2-0 since the first time in 2012, and the Panthers start 0-2 to start off the season. Next matchup is between 2 divisional opponents in the NFC West, between the Arizona Cardinals and the Los Angeles Rams. The Arizona Cardinals defeated the Rams 41-10, and heading into week 3, the Cardinals have a 1-1 record, and the Rams start off 0-2 for the season. Matthew Stafford went 19 for 27 for 216 yards, and Kyler Murray went 17 for 21 with 266 yards and 3 touchdowns. James Conner had 21 carries for 122 yards and a touchdown, and the rookie out of Ohio State, Marvin Harrison Jr., had 4 receptions for 130 yards and 2 touchdowns. The Cardinals scored the first points of the game with a touchdown, and heading into the second quarter, they had increased their lead to 21-4. The Rams answered back in the second quarter with a field goal, and heading into halftime, the score was 24-3 with the Cardinals leading, and with that halftime lead, they kept increasing it as the Rams could only score 7 points in the second half, in which the Cardinals defeated them 41-10. The next game of the week was an AFC conference matchup between the Baltimore Ravens and the Las Vegas Raiders, in which the Raiders defeated the Ravens 26-23. The Raiders start off 1-1 heading into week 3, and the Ravens start off 0-2. Gardner Minshew went 30 for 38 with 276 yards, 1 touchdown, and 1 interception. Lamar Jackson went 21 for 34 and 247 yards with a touchdown and an interception as well. Derrick Henry had 18 carries for 84 yards and a touchdown. Zay Flowers had 7 receptions for 91 yards and a touchdown. For the Raiders, Devontae Adams had 9 receptions for 110 yards and a touchdown. Brock Bowers had 9 receptions for 98 yards as well. The Ravens scored the first points of the game with a field goal, and heading into halftime, the game was close as Baltimore had a 9-6 lead. Heading into the second half, the Ravens had a 16-6 lead over the Raiders and maintained that 10-point lead up until the 4-minute mark in the fourth quarter, in which the Raiders tied the game up 23-23. After the Raiders' touchdown to tie the game up, the Ravens had to punt the ball, in which the Raiders drove up to a field goal attempt in which Daniel Carlson hit a 38-yard field goal to give the Raiders a 3-point lead over the Ravens with 27 seconds left in the game. The Ravens could not drive down to get into field goal range as the Raiders defeated them 26-23. The next game of the week was between two AFC opponents, in which the Cleveland Browns defeated the Jaguars 18-13. Heading into week 3, the Browns are 1-1 and the Jaguars are 0-2. Deshaun Watson had 22 for 34 attempts and 186 yards, and Trevor Lawrence had 14 for 30 attempts for 220 yards. Travis Etienne Jr. had 13 carries for 52 yards and a touchdown, as Brian Thomas Jr. had 2 receptions for 94 yards on the day. The Browns scored the first points of the game with a touchdown and headed into halftime with a 13-3 lead over Jacksonville, and both offenses were only able to score at the most 8 points on the Browns side and 10 points for the Jaguars. Heading into the fourth quarter, the Jags scored a touchdown, making the score 16-10, and then they cut it into 3 points with a field goal, but they ended up getting a safety, and the Browns controlled the rest of the game, winning 18-3. The next matchup of the week was between two AFC conference opponents, in which the New York Jets defeated the Tennessee Titans 24-17. The Jets head into week 3 with a 1-1 record, and the Titans start off with a 0-2 record. Aaron Rodgers went 18 for 30 for 176 yards and 2 touchdowns, and Will Levis went 19 for 28 for 192 yards, 1 touchdown, and 1 interception. The Titans scored the first points of the game with a touchdown. Heading into halftime, the Titans led 10-7 over the Jets. However, on the first drive at the third quarter, the Jets scored a touchdown and took a 14-10 lead over the Titans, and they scored another field goal, taking a 17-10 lead, but the Titans scored a touchdown right back to tie the game to 17, and it wasn't until the fourth quarter that either team was able to break through, in which the Jets scored a touchdown with 4:31 left in the fourth quarter. That was Braylon Allen with a 20-yard touchdown. And on the ensuing drive, the Titans had ran out of downs with a 4th and goal at their 14-yard line, and this gave the Jets the ball back with them getting into victory formation and running down the clock. The next game of the week was between two NFC conference teams, the San Francisco 49ers and the Minnesota Vikings, in which the Vikings defeated the Niners 23-17. The Vikings head into week 3 with a 2-0 record, and the Niners have a 1-1 record. Brock Purdy went 28 for 36 with 319 yards, 1 touchdown, and 1 interception, as Sam Darnold went 17 for 26 for 268 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. Jordan Mason, in place of the injured Christian McCaffrey, had 20 carries for 100 yards and 1 touchdown. Deebo Samuel went 8 receptions for 110 yards, and Justin Jefferson on the Vikings went 4 receptions for 133 yards and 1 touchdown. The Vikings scored the first points of the game with a field goal, and this game headed into halftime with the Vikings leading the Niners 13-7. In the third quarter, the Vikings increased their lead as they scored a touchdown and took a 20-7 lead heading into the fourth quarter, and it wasn't until the fourth quarter that the 49ers scored another touchdown and cut the score down to 6. It was 20-14. The Vikings then scored a field goal to increase their lead to 9, and the 49ers answered with a field goal of their own to make the score 17-23, and the Niners could not recover their onside kick, so Sam Darnold led the offense into victory formation, and we ended up with the final score in which the Vikings beat the Niners 23-17. The next matchup of the week was between the Seattle Seahawks and the New England Patriots, in which the Seahawks beat the Patriots 23-20. The Seahawks head into week 3 with a 2-0 record, and the Patriots head into week 3 with a 1-1 record. Geno Smith went 33 for 44 for 327 yards and a touchdown, as Jacoby Brissett went 15 for 27 with 149 yards and a touchdown. DK Metcalf had 10 receptions for 129 yards and a touchdown, as Hunter Henry had 8 receptions for 109 yards. New England scored the first points of the game, taking a 7-0 lead, and heading into halftime, the score was 17-13 with the Seahawks in the lead. On a Patriots drive that started in the third quarter and ended in the fourth, they had scored a touchdown, in which the Patriots led 20-17. However, on the drive after, the Patriots missed a field goal, and the Seahawks tied the game up with a field goal of their own on the next drive. We headed into overtime with the Patriots getting the ball first, but they went 3 and out and punted the ball, in which the Seahawks drove down and won with a field goal. The next game of the week was between the New Orleans Saints and the Dallas Cowboys, in which the Saints won 44-19. The Saints head into week 3 with a 2-0 record, and the Cowboys are 1-1. Derek Carr went 11 for 16 for 243 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. Dak Prescott went 27 for 39 with 293 yards, a touchdown, and 2 interceptions. Alvin Kamara went 20 for 150 yards and 3 touchdowns. Rashid Shaheed went 4 receptions, 96 yards, and a touchdown. CeeDee Lamb went 4 receptions, 90 yards, and a touchdown on the day. The Saints scored the first points of the game with a touchdown and had a 21-6 lead over the Cowboys by the second quarter. Heading into halftime, the Saints led 35-16. The Cowboys answered with a field goal on their first drive of the second half, but wouldn't score any more points, and that led to the Saints winning 44-19. The next game of the week was between the Commanders and the Giants, in which the Commanders beat the Giants 21-18. The Commanders head into week 3 with a 1-1 record. The Giants head into week 3 with a 0-2 record. Daniel Jones went 16 for 28 with 178 yards and 2 touchdowns. Jaden Daniels went 23 for 29 with 226 yards. Devin Singletary had 16 carries for 95 yards and a touchdown. Brian Robinson Jr. had 17 carries for 133 yards, and rookie Malik Neighbors had 10 receptions for 127 yards and a touchdown. The Commanders scored the first points of the game with a field goal, taking a 3-0 lead. However, heading into halftime, the Giants led 12-9. In the second half, we had lots of lead changes and ties as both teams exchanged field goals until Seibert kicked a 30-yard field goal at the end of the game to give the Commanders a 21-18 victory over the Giants. The next game of the week was between the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Detroit Lions, in which the Buccaneers defeated the Lions 20-16. The Buccaneers head into week 3 with a 2-0 record and the Lions with a 1-1 record. Baker Mayfield went 12 for 19 with 185 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. Goff went 34 for 55 with 307 yards and 2 interceptions. Chris Godwin had 7 receptions for 117 yards and a touchdown. Amon-Ra St. Brown went 11 receptions for 119 yards. The Buccaneers scored the first points of the game with a field goal, and heading into halftime, Tampa Bay led 13-6, with Detroit taking the lead in the third quarter 16-13. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers answered right back with a touchdown of their own to take a 20-16 lead right back. Both teams could not score after that as the Buccaneers beat the Lions. The next game of the week was between the Green Bay Packers and the Colts, in which the Packers beat the Colts 16-10. The Packers are 1-1 heading into week 3, and the Colts are 0-2. Anthony Richardson went 17 for 34 with 204 yards, 1 touchdown, and 3 interceptions. Malik Willis went 12 for 14 with 122 yards and a touchdown. Jonathan Taylor went 12 carries for 103 yards, and Josh Jacobs had 32 carries for 151 yards. The Packers took a 10-0 lead over the Colts in the first quarter, and the half ended with that scoreline. And the Packers scored a field goal to start off the second half, and the Colts answered with one right back. It wasn't until the fourth quarter, under the 2-minute warning, that the Colts scored their first touchdown of the game. The Colts got the ball at the end of the game, but ended up running out of time, and Richardson threw a pick on the last play to seal the victory for the Packers. The next matchup of the week was between the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Denver Broncos, in which the Steelers beat the Broncos 13-6. The Steelers are 2-0 to start off the season, as the Broncos are 0-2. Justin Fields went 13 for 20 for 117 yards and a touchdown. Bo Nix went 20 for 35 for 246 yards, but had 2 interceptions. The Steelers scored the first points of the game with a touchdown and took a 10-0 lead over the Broncos to head into halftime. They scored a field goal in the third quarter and took a 13-0 lead over the Broncos, and it wasn't until the fourth quarter that the Broncos scored their first points of the game with a field goal. The Broncos scored a second field goal just under the 2-minute warning to cut the Steelers' lead down to a possession, and it was 2 plays in that the Broncos had the ball, and it ended up with the Broncos running out of time as Bo Nix threw a pick as time expired, and this led to the Steelers winning 13-6. The next game of the week was between the Kansas City Chiefs and the Cincinnati Bengals, in which the Chiefs won 26-25. The Chiefs start the year 2-0, and the Bengals start off 0-2. Patrick Mahomes went 18 for 25 with 151 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 2 picks. Joe Burrow went 23 for 36 with 258 yards and 2 touchdowns. Isaiah Pacheco got hurt in the game but went for 19 carries for 90 yards. Mike Gesicki had 7 receptions for 91 yards. Rashee Rice had 5 receptions for 75 yards and a touchdown. The Bengals scored the first points of the game with a field goal. The Chiefs answered right back with a field goal of their own, and once the Bengals scored a touchdown, the Chiefs did the same. And heading into halftime, the Bengals led 16-10. The Chiefs got the ball first in the second half and scored with a touchdown of their own, and then the Bengals answered right back. Joe Burrow then fumbled the ball, in which the Chiefs defense returned it for a touchdown and took a 23-22 lead over the Bengals to start the fourth quarter. The Bengals then scored a field goal with 9:28 remaining in the fourth quarter. Then both teams punted the ball, in which the Chiefs got the ball for the final drive of the game, in which they set up Harrison Butker with a game-winning 51-yard field goal attempt, and the Chiefs won 26-25. This week's Sunday Night Football matchup was between the Houston Texans and the Chicago Bears, in which the Texans won 19-13. The Texans head into Week 3 with a 2-0 record. The Bears have a 1-1 record. Caleb Williams went 23 for 37 for 174 yards and 2 interceptions. C.J. Stroud went 23 for 36 with 260 yards and a touchdown. Nico Collins had 8 receptions for 135 yards and a touchdown. The Texans scored the first points of the game with a field goal. Chicago answered right back with a field goal of their own, and then on the next drive, the Texans scored a touchdown. The first points of the second half were scored with the Texans' field goal, in which they increased their lead to 9. It wasn't until 2:51 left in the fourth quarter that the Bears scored with a field goal of their own, and on the ensuing drive, the Bears went turnover on downs, and that led to seal the Texans' victory 19-13. The final game of the week was a Monday Night Football game between the Atlanta Falcons and the Philadelphia Eagles, in which the Falcons beat the Eagles 22-21. Both teams are 1-1 to start off the season. Kirk Cousins went 20 for 29 for 241 yards and 2 touchdowns. Jalen Hurts went 23 for 30 with 183 yards, 1 touchdown, and 1 interception. Bijan Robinson had 14 carries for 97 yards. Saquon Barkley had 22 for 95. Darnell Mooney had 3 receptions for 88 yards and a touchdown. And Devontae Smith had 7 receptions for 76 yards and a touchdown. The Falcons scored the first points of the game in the second quarter with a field goal, in which on the next drive the Eagles responded with a touchdown. And on the final drive for the Falcons heading into halftime, they scored a field goal, and we ended up at halftime with the Eagles leading 7-6. To start off the second half, we had lots of scoring as each team traded field goals and touchdowns. With just under 2 minutes to go, a minute 39 to be exact, Jake Elliott made a 28-yard field goal attempt to push the Eagles' lead to 6, 21-15, in which Kirk Cousins led a 6-play, 70-yard drive within a minute and a half, and it was capped off with a Kirk Cousins touchdown to Drake London for 7 yards, in which this gave the Falcons a 1-point lead with 34 seconds remaining in the fourth quarter. And on the final drive of the game, it was 2 plays in which Jalen Hurts threw a pick and Kirk Cousins led out his offense into victory formation to seal the Falcons' victory. that caps off all 16 games of the NFL Week 2 in 2024. Let me know in the comments below, who do you guys think will win the matchups in Week 3? If you like this type of content, like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out as we are trying to get to 1,000 subscribers. If you're a fan of the NFL and college football, stay tuned as we'll be covering both all season long. Appreciate all the support, and we'll catch you in the next one. Take care.